Okay, good. So we're live.
All
Hi,
right.
Emily.
Hello, Colin.
Hi. So I'm gonna pronounce your surname. Seems the thing that I always start my talks with. I'm going to say your surname,
Close. Haruko.
Haruko.
Just
Okay, there you
yeah,
go. All right.
just as
Very
perhaps a North American accent would sound it out.
nice.
Haruko. It means child of spring in Japanese.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay. There's some Japanese in your family.
Yeah, so Haruko is legally my middle name. So I go
Okay.
my first and my middle name. And before I was born, my parents studied Zen Buddhism in Japan. And
Okay.
so, as a homage to that period of their life, they gave my sister and I both Japanese middle names.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
yeah, and I will probably go back to my maiden name soon, but legally, I'm still my married name. And I have recently decided to drop that part of my name and start just going by Emily Haruko.
Oh, nice. Love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
Well, can I just ask what your sister's middle name is?
Of course, it's Hisayo
Okay.
and yeah, Hisayo. And that means, I believe it means like everlasting child.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So she's like eternally youthful, you
Oh,
know?
nice.
Yeah.
Is that a matching description of her?
I think it's, I mean, with in some regards for sure. She's also like an ancient wisdom like guru. She doesn't like when I call her a guru, but yeah, she's in that esoteric world and
Nice. Good. So, just I think I always like to start this off. Just give some background of you. So, what do you think is important for people to know about you? What do you do? How did you get there? Any anything you think's useful to sort of set some context of what you do today and maybe the journey you took to get there, if that helps.
sure. Yeah, I think I have a little bit. I walked a little bit of the unbeaten path, or what is the term? It's first thing in the morning, Friday morning here, but we're live. We're going to do the best we can. Unconventional. That is the word that is much more descriptive of what I wanted to say. My path is a little bit, yeah, unconventional in that sense. I suppose why I'm here and why somebody might want to tune in is I consider myself a transformational leader in the world. So I have formal coaching training, leadership and executive training. But I think what makes my story interesting in this capacity is that I come by this work very honestly. I am a second generation transformational leadership coach. So I think what makes conversations with me interesting in the realm of coaching and leadership development is sort of maybe the breadth or the depth of exposure and insight that I have into not only the tools of transformation and coaching and leadership development, but the industry itself. So in the 1980s, my dad was part of a group of gentlemen in Vancouver in the early 1980s that were working with well-known sports coaches in the NFL, on the pro golf circuit, and in the MLB. And they were consulting a group of essentially consultants on what it would look like to bring the concept of sports coaching into business. And at the time, my father's now late business partner, Jim Selman, was known to have said, in any endeavor where human performance matters, coaching is present, except in business. And that has changed a lot over the course of the last, 40 to 45 years, but still very much um, not something that we see as a standard across the board, but rather, coaching or leadership development opportunities being offered to, organizations that have a robust HR department or are maybe a little bit more progressive in their culture, or are simply, it's being demanded by the people that work within their organization that they, be invested in that way. So I'm super fascinated. I think the essence of that and like my personal belief is that I really believe we spend so much time at work, and I believe that as leaders and entrepreneurs, business owners, or even managers, we have the opportunity to cultivate environments for ourselves and for our team that allow us, hopefully, in the right scenario, to cultivate who we are as brilliant and genius in the world, right? If I'm every day showing up to a role where I feel challenged in a great way, right? There's a healthy level of friction, but I'm engaged and I enjoy what I'm doing and I'm relatively good at it. This is a recipe for flow states. This is a recipe for cultivating genius inside of individuals. And that's really my mission, and what I get really excited about is doing work inside of organizations and with individuals that create change and transformation through the growth of the individual. That tracking? That makes sense?
Yeah, yeah. So there's a few threads I'd like to pull on here. So actually, it's quite aligned with some content I've been posting recently about about actually why in sports we have coaches and we don't in business. So it was actually a conversation that I had with a coach here, and I realised that we don't. It's I mean, maybe you'll give better insights, but I can't think of any company that I've been in, and I generally come from the finance world, so big corporations. So it's not to say it doesn't exist; it just wasn't visible to my eyes. That you have some, all these managers, you have all these teams, these people. The only time I've ever seen a coach turn up was for like a 1 day training on like leadership, and then apparently you're supposed to be able to sail the ship into the distance, which is absolutely mind-boggling. Or we did go through this agile transformation. So I worked at a company, and they went through, I don't know if it was 6 months to a year, and because it was basically from delivering projects in a waterfall way to agile, it was a global transformation, all offices everywhere, and it required these coaches to sit in pockets where they could help. But the reality is, no. So I worked in the industry for 20 plus years, and they're maybe the two examples that I can give you. So, but what went from this conversation that I had, I was like, well, yeah, we are expected to turn up and give our best, give more than our best, let go of things that no longer serve us, and just be bold and lead without a coach. Yet in sports, it's so different because there is this focus and it's like accepted. Whereas in the business world, it seems almost a bit like, oh, you can't handle it. That's how my mind's thinking. So am I off kilter there? What's your take?
No, I think you're right on the money. I think it really comes down to who's the decision maker behind the dollar. If you've got an HR department that has their own budgets and are super human centered and, tapped into what change and transformation truly looks like and is required and how to sustain it within an organization, you might see some coaching or leadership development deployed through those avenues. The other alternative is sometimes there are C-suites that have their own budget or are have the autonomy to invest in their org, their department, they're part of the org on their own. And sometimes you've got a CEO or even a board. I did 2 years virtual work in the New Zealand startup ecosystem, where a group of VCs, PE, and angel investors got together and created essentially a sponsorship fund for our organization that I was working with at the time to do a founder well-being program. So what they did is the angel VC and private equity put together a fund, and then what they did from that fund, compensated our organization for this training and program. But then I think for a nominal fee, like $50, or we wanted people to have a little skin in the game, or $250 or something. Any founder in their portfolio, of all of their portfolios, any founder and any member of their team could enroll in this, I think, 4-month well-being program. That was not only about their well-being and preventing burnout, but also giving them core managerial competency training, teaching them how to hire and recruit, to really understand, as a founder, you often have to wear multiple hats. We're usually not all great at all of those hats. So really being determining with, where are the bridges that you need to gap in the interim for the roles or the hats that you need to wear that may not fall under your greatest strengths, and be prepared that when you get some funding, or when you when you land some clients, maybe you're turning in a small profit, know the roles with which you want to hire first that will eliminate some of the, like slog of the tasks that you're not great at. Actually, I'll just share a distinction, maybe if it's helpful for this conversation, and as it relates actually to cultivating like what we call the zone of genius, right? Which so this is a terms of zones of flow that comes from an author named Gay Hendricks, and he talks essentially about how there are 4 zones within which we operate predominantly, and I'll say that we do this like within the workplace. So there's the zone of incompetence. This is the stuff that you're not really good at doing and you don't really like doing it. There's the zone of competence. It's the stuff you're pretty good at, but you don't really enjoy it. But everyone's like, you should do it because you're great at it. And you're like, ah. And then we've got the zone of excellence. This is the stuff that you're good at and you also enjoy doing it. But too long in this area and it gets monotonous. Maybe you have been in a role, or someone that's been in a role where like, yeah, it's great, but like they're just kind of like, churning things over day to day. There's not necessarily
no growth.
Exactly. So the zone of genius, as I mentioned, is where there is a healthy dose of challenge and friction that's keeping you engaged and, that inertia going. And you're good at those tasks and you enjoy them. And when we've got a recipe for those 3 things, that's what we call the zone of genius. Now, most people in most of their roles, we often all have aspects of our role that fall into the zone of incompetence or competence. This is things like maybe you hate Slack, but it's like your organization's like main form of communication. Or I know a lot of people, especially of the younger generation coming up, just really don't use email in the way that like some of us were sort of trained or are used to. So, those are maybe trite examples, but they may be some things where like you've got to operate in those zones, at least for parts of your day or for parts of your role. But ideally, we don't want people spending too much time in competence or incompetence, because this is where people burn out faster. This is where people turn over, where retention, we lose retention in our talent when we have wrong people in wrong roles. When we can foster environments where people are cultivating that zone of genius, right? They're challenged, they're good at what they're doing, and they enjoy doing it. We can sustain longer hours of work. I'm not suggesting that we need to work longer hours, but what might be required of you with a particular project or proposal or whatever, client deliverables, whatever it may be, you can sustain longer hours. You'll burn out less fast, if you will, and you'll enjoy what you're doing a lot more. You'll be part of a much more cohesive environment and culture. And I think that this is the opportunity that we have as leaders and business owners. And that's what I get lit up about. I don't even know if I actually answered your question there. We went into, I know. I'll bring it home. So yes, there is a lot of ways that organizations can invest in their talent and do it the wrong way, i.e. not investing in your talent or not doing anything for those retention or growth or the opportunities to kind of keep that inertia moving. But I think it does kind of start at the top, or at least it starts with somebody that has the buying power behind those decisions and what their philosophy might be in terms of growth and development for their organization. Because there's a lot of bad coaching out there. There's a lot of bad leadership development out there. So I get when people are skeptical 100%.
So when you were talking, there's this thing in my mind where you were saying, I can't remember which one it was, but that you're good at something. Sorry, let's imagine I'm good at something. It'd be a great thing. And everyone says that you're good at it, but you really don't like doing it. And that's felt quite often in my career, if I'm honest. And I want to say it sort of balances with this imposter syndrome where you think, oh, well, I'm not actually that good. There's other people. And I think that's my personality type. But there's also, I've kind of been pushed in directions. And so why I'm trying to formulate my question, don't worry. But ultimately, what I found in my career was that what I was good at or perceived to be good at was of benefit for the company, not myself. And this is where this struggle is, because people go, oh, yeah, you're good. And so this leads me to I think that in certain situations, in certain positions, I've actually been elevated. People said you're good, and internally, I really struggle with it. Maybe not even that imposter syndrome, something more that actually I don't enjoy it. This isn't. Yeah, I can do this. I can switch this on, but because you're good, you're demanded, you're put on a pedestal, and you're rewarded status, money, etc. And then you find yourself climbing this weird ladder of, I don't like being here. People are praising me, which is kind of what I want secretly. You know, it's not secretly. It's, you know, I want the praise, but then when I get there, I'm not happy, and I felt that for myself. I'm sure there's a lot of people that feel something similar. So again, so there's this sort of two sides to it. It's beneficial. Yes, it's good short term. Yeah, you get a little bit of praise, but it also comes from the company, and I think they're not asking about you as a person. It's what you can do for them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, this is sort of like the default mode of capitalism, if you will, right? Like,
Yeah.
give us your life. You know, we'll give you a lot of money, but give us your life and all of your energy and your time and your skill. All right, here's what comes to mind when you share. I think you're right. I think a lot of people are in these positions. And I think that financial stability and security is real. And it is something that most people value significantly. And so I think maybe what, you know, I might say to someone in that situation is, could you take really an honest audit of what you value in your life? So the things that bring you joy and fulfillment, the things that light you the F up. Because what lights you up, Colin, is not necessarily what lights me up. And what lights up, you know, any of our listeners up right now is not necessarily going to be the same thing that light you and I up. So when we talk about like living a fulfilled life or like a values aligned life, right? This means that we need to be spending our time in areas that are resonant with us, where we, you know, again, are hopefully scratching those realms of zones of genius or excellence. But I think one thing that people that I notice, and this is maybe a bit of a generalization, is that people they take jobs and they, you know, stay in jobs and or in corporate or like what you're saying, like there's this like this inclination of like, oh, I don't really love it here, but I'm getting all this praise and I seem to be really good at this thing, but there's like an internal misalignment. So two things there. One is like, can you take an honest stock of like the value that you have around your financial security or your income or your money, like your relationship with money? Because for most people, that is what's driving the decision to stay.
Yeah.
Some form of their comfort zone, some form of the dollar, some form of security. And I think that sometimes, not everybody, sometimes people don't honor that value that they have enough, or they don't name it, they don't claim it enough. Thus, they do this thing where they go to work every day and then they just, you know, moan about their boss and they moan about their responsibilities. You know, and they're not sitting there giving gratitude for that multi-six-figure paycheck that they have coming in, but they're sort of like, they put themselves almost in this trap. They put themselves. So what does that mean? Like, you're almost gaslighting yourself a little bit. Does that, it's like I'm a victim of my choices. It's like, oh, I've got this great, you know, $250,000 a year job at this amazing public company that takes care of me, but man, I got to give my life. And yeah, that might be true. You might be giving your life and you might be really unhappy and unfulfilled. But here's what I'm going to suggest is, one, can you look at it through the lens of the value that you might have around your financial security? And then furthermore, here's what I suggest. Because what I'm hearing and what you said and what I'm making an assumption is that the people in this situation are showing up to their life every day not aligned, not values aligned, not on purpose. Not on purpose meaning like, what is deep in your soul, what is the hill you know you would die on, that you would risk whatever for, right? Like, there is an internal fire that is probably, you know, dwindling or tindering, if you will, inside of some of those people. So I like to look or suggest that people look at their values like metaphorical bank accounts. So you've got the bank account of work, right? Financial security. This is a value that I have. Therefore, it has this virtual bank account. Family probably has its own bank account. If you're in partnership, your, romantic relationship, partnership probably has its own bank account. Your kids, they have their own bank account. All the things that you value, they have an account. You as an individual determine the deposits that you make in each one of those accounts. So every time that I spend quality time with my kids, making a deposit in that account. Every time I show up, my 9 to 5, my corporate job, I'm sitting in my cubicle, whatever it is, I'm putting a deposit in that financial security account. Maybe you love the outdoors, you love camping. Every time you go skiing, you're putting a deposit in that account. All of the things that bring you joy and fulfillment, you've got an account for those. Where you may be suffering or causing yourself some pain, you need to take an honest look at what's the balance in those accounts. And if you've been putting deposit after deposit after deposit into your financial stability account or your work or your career account, and your kid account or your family account's in overdraft, you might want to be considering taking some PTO, or right, like that's just one tried example. But listen, if all you're doing in your career and your life is putting deposits into that financial security bank account, yes, you clearly really value financial security, and I'm really happy for you. But can you please take an honest look at what are some of the other aspects of your life that bring you joy and fulfillment? And could you consider putting some deposits in those arenas? If when you do that, you're still majorly suffering over here in your career, yeah, it's probably time to have a transition conversation if you are actually ultimately committed to living a life of joy and fulfillment, and not just one of honoring that financial stability and bank account, which, by the way, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I think people should stop gaslighting themselves in the sense that they're a victim to their choices and, oh, I got to go, do this slog every day. No, you are doing that with full conscious choice. What's the perspective that you need to start relating to those choices that will be a little bit more empowering? Or what are some of the changes that we need to make that will, cultivate or yield a little bit more joy and fulfillment?
Yeah. So the whole value conversation is very strange. So I've done quite a lot of discovery on myself, over the years. Been to therapy, best thing I've ever done in my life. And I fell into.
I acknowledge you for that.
Thank you. I fell into the world of values, and I think to myself, let's say, I'm still not 100% because sometimes they shift, and I think that's about priorities. But let's say I got to the age of 45 and never knew what my values were or questioned them. And I'm like, you kind of think that you know what they are, or there's something in the background. But what I realized, and this, you have the term midlife crisis.
Of course.
Okay. So I think this is actually what this is. It's basically you
for
lived
you
your life
specifically.
For
specifically, or one in general?
Well, for everyone in general. So I think
just clarifying.
Yeah. So what I found is that most of my values came from my childhood or the people I was surrounded by, and it's very easy for parents to put stuff on you without realizing. The simplest thing that you could say to your child can really be translated, and it could basically run the storyline for their whole life.
Yeah.
And what I find is that actually a lot of the values, if people ask me what they were before, I was actually saying values of my parents, and I was like, oh shit, and then it took me a long while to sort of decouple what other people's values were and what were mine. And because it sounds so easy, you could just reel them off. But it's really I think by looking back at your past, looking at things where you were, where you came alive, where things really made sense to you, I think that's a good place to start looking at values. And then when you, so I'm still not there. Freedom is one of the things that I want, which is weird because I've spent most of my life basically in corporations doing things that everyone else said. So I'm not sure if that's the rebellious value. I'm not sure, but I think how could I have spent so long, going through this and actually not questioning values. And it's really, I think, as a cultural thing, and I think even, we can turn it back to business, I guess, a little bit. But companies say they've got all these values. In my mind, they're all bullshit. They're just like a slogan on a wall. No one believes it. Even if someone does believe it at the top, by the time it filters down, it's just something else. It's not reality. I think some people start out with aspirational ones and they change and they never update them. But I had a situation a while ago in my previous job where they wanted me to do an activity absolutely aligned with what the company did. But I didn't want to do it. And it was I was going one direction and they wanted something else. And for a week, basically it was an interview for a job. For a week, I had this like knot in my stomach. It was just like, oh, what's this? And I was like, I couldn't sleep. I was wrestling. I was restless. And I was like, what the hell is this? And I did the interview. It didn't pan out anyway. But then I realized, this is a conflict of values, what they wanted and what I wanted. And I was like, it was an odd situation, but I was like, okay, I need to follow my values rather than someone else's. And this was quite a big shift for me, because we talk about intuition a lot. And I think when you get those feelings, something's not right. I'm not great at intuition. I'm getting better at understanding, okay, this gut thing. And I was like, okay, this is what this is. So I tried to tap into that when I think, okay, does this make sense to do this? Is it right? So, and I think in business, we have this quite a lot. No one could be perfectly aligned necessarily with the business values. I don't think. I mean, I've not come across it, maybe in some charity works or something like that, where something is deeply resonant. But in corporations, these things often are of conflict. Again, turn it over to you. What's your experience of
that? Yeah, I think, well, there's so much in there. There's so many threads we can pull on there. Oh, okay. So, let's just touch on this like organizational values thing, because yeah, you're right. I think a lot of times like organizations either just don't have values, right? Or they've like thought of some things that sound pretty good or that think like sort of represent or kind of align who they are. So I'm really a big fan of guiding organizations to establish their values. If they haven't done that already, there's a process that we can go through to do that. But beyond that, we look at guiding principles, right? Or essentially, what are the actions that we take? What is like the actual tangible ways in which we interact or communicate that are representative of those values in action, right? So, for example, a value we have might be like, I don't know, customer first or customer service first, something like that, for example. The guiding principle to that might be like, we listen, right? So whether like, our customers are always right, or we always put the customer first, and how do we demonstrate that? What are we doing? It's not just like customer first, nice bold letters like plastered on the wall, right? It's like, how do we do that? We listen. So everybody in the organization knows like part of our job is to be active listeners, right? That's how we know we're honoring or demonstrating the values that we have in action. So I think values are super powerful. They're amazing when they're done authentically and in alignment. But furthermore, particularly in an organization, we need to have some sort of guiding principle or action items that demonstrate what those values in action actually look like. Then we have something to measure. Then we know, are we actually being values aligned, right? Are we actually in clear communication? Are we actually collaborating? Are we actually, using AI, like whatever our values are, whatever we claim, those values to be. So I think that's a little bit of like what an organization kind of needs, the onus, I think, on an organization. And then there's also not only creating and identifying what those things are, but then it's deploying it to the org, right? Then it's deploying it to the senior leadership team and making sure that it's like embedded in the way that they do things, and that's trickling down, onto their teams and, down to the ICs and so forth. So I think that's a little bit of like the organizational perspective. I just want to touch on what you kind of go back to what you said about like sort of these values being bestowed upon us, or like the values that we almost more have adopted, not that they've been generated more from the inside out. And I think you're right. I think a lot of people are going through life or have just lived life not even questioning, their own individual values. And maybe when someone asks them, they're more like reporting on what, as you mentioned, what maybe your parents' values were. Or I notice a lot of times people start getting into morals or ethics, right?
Yeah.
Like, what are your values? Oh, it's like to be a good person. Well, maybe, but you can tell when someone's just like rattling something off because it's like what they think it is versus like what is the thing from the inside out that lights you the F up, because that's what a real value is. A real value is unique to the individual. And I believe that we can identify those values based on like how we feel. So this brings up another thing that you mentioned, is like we know when something is aligned when it sits in our body like a hell yes, right? You probably had a situation, a person, an interview, a date, a movie, something that you had, a job opportunity, something that you had that feeling in your gut, and it was like there was wisdom there. It was crunching up, it was contracting, it was constricting, and if your body could talk, it was saying no, right? And then you've probably had times where someone was like, hey, let's go on vacation to Curacao, and you like, whoo, it feels expansive and your chest is open and you're like, and you can feel in your body, that's a hell yes, right? So this is what we call somatic wisdom. Soma means of the body. So it's really just listening to what is the wisdom of the body. So I'll train people sometimes to, when they're looking or making decisions or, assessing, cultivating their self-awareness, whatever it may be, where you living? You living from the neck up, right? Or where are you sourcing some of that wisdom from the neck down? And if you want to get like specific in this area, you can check into like the cavity, like the domain of where your heart lives. There is a wisdom center in here. You can feel it when you're connected with somebody, when you're breathing with somebody, when you're having a moment, you can feel that expansion in your chest, right? There's wisdom there. Your gut is another place where we store wisdom, like that somatic wisdom, the wisdom of the body in your gut. When we were in utero, what was our intestines and our brain were once the same thing, and they then separated and the spine was developed. And so when we think about like trust your gut, or that saying, my gut's just like it's talking to me, that is like literally true. There is literally wisdom living in there. By the way, 80% of your immune system also lives in your gut. So you want to have better intuition, you want to have more clarity, keep that immune system high and kicking, because that wisdom center is where that wisdom center, one of those 3 wisdom centers lives. So I think if you want to start living more values aligned as an individual, keep cultivating those 3 centers of wisdom. This is a very, very powerful wisdom center, 100%. But we don't want this thing operating in a silo. We've got 2 other centers below the neck that we can tap into that can provide guidance, that are speaking to us all the time. Are we listening? Right? Your nervous system and your body is speaking to you all the time. So I like to use that distinction, hell yes versus hell no. It's like, when you're a hell yes to something, right? When your body's a full, like, I want this thing, like it's on, let's go. And and you're like, ooh, like I know when that's like, I'm like contracted or constricted, and it's like, my body's telling me no, right? Am I listening? And I like to say there's no hell maybe. If there's a hell maybe, it's probably a no. Yeah. And if you're really inquisitive as around whatever this maybe might be, ask yourself, what does this situation or scenario, whatever, what does this need to look like in order for me to be a hell yes? Because hell maybe is a no. Like, you're sitting there debating if you like something or not. You don't like it. You're sitting there like, wondering if you should do this thing or not. You don't want to do it. Right? When you're a full body yes to something. Now, again, sometimes we need to like do things that we don't want to do or whatever, but we're talking about like tapping into that somatic wisdom, allowing that to guide your values and letting those values kind of guide your lifestyle and your decision making. All that tracking?
Yeah, it's just honestly, my mind's blowing in terms of, okay, because I'm thinking, so that I'll share where my mind's going with this. So first of all, the values, basically we feel that it starts from the top and trickles down.
In an organization, Or actually,
yeah,
sure, even in a familial situation, sure.
yeah. So, but yeah, in an organization, and I'm thinking, in reality, so like you say, let's just say, for instance, in a traditional way, CEO makes the values. It's his company if he founded it or whatever,
Or her
and then,
company.
but yeah, apologies. And basically, that has to trickle down. The reality is, like I said, that gets very diluted. You need people like you there to really hold people accountable and to sort of filter that down, because like most communication, it goes one level and then it's like Chinese whispers, gets somehow really changed. So I'm thinking, how does that actually work in reality in a company? So I'm just thinking, a company's all messed up. Okay, they've gone back to basics. What's our values? You can't just say, oh, this is it, and send a nice little letter. It has to be integrated into decisions, into what people were thinking, and again, a poster on a wall is not going to do it. But I think general reminders are useful. So I do have this split mind where you have these slogans on the wall. I think sometimes when shit hits the fan and you say, right, okay, well, what, I've got two choices to make. Which one do I make? If you've got the values there, you can go, right, okay, this is important. And again, I know priorities in values can change a bit.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I can't imagine a company can do that internally without someone like you and your team, and because that just it needs, if you need to live and breathe it for a long time for that to be part of this culture, that really to come through.
Yeah.
Then I also think that values is such an important thing on the hiring side of things, because we hire, and if you actually explain, I know people say, well, these are our values and hire, but the reality is, if your values are out and you start hiring, you've hired the wrong people because they're misguided. They go, oh yeah, it's all honesty and openness. No. So there's so much benefit with starting with getting that right as a company, and as a person. And then this is where my mind went. I'm an overthinker. Not as I have experienced other people that think much more than I do, but generally I go down a lot of rabbit holes of something that actually didn't happen. But
Can I just interject with the Mark Twain, something along the lines of the Mark Twain quote, which is,
okay.
I have known a great many trouble, most of which never came true.
Yeah, really. Yeah, it's very accurate. And so recently, and I talked about this yesterday, that this intuition, this gut, and I found it really interesting how you explained it, because that makes a lot more sense. How we're, we start out and we grow. So this intuition is something that I think that we switch off, or we have not beaten out of us necessarily, but just by our parents, etc. So I have two young children, as we talked about before, and so I have a coach, and she was talking to me about intuition, and I was like, I don't know what that necessarily is. And sometimes intuition is, you say, in your brain, and I'm a bit like, And so what happens is, and I explained this yesterday, when I take the kids shopping, especially in the like fruit and vegetables, and I gave the example of watermelons, because watermelons can be tricky to sort of say if they're ripe. I know there's you can tap on it. But I say to my kids, can you pick it out? And 9 times out of 10, kids can pick out the better one. And they might look at it and stuff like that. And I'm like, and they do it. And they've done it with loads of different fruit, but watermelon really is the one that stands out for me. And I'm like, wow. And I tell them, I'm like, when we eat it, and I go, you pick this out. You knew which one to do. Because, there's 30, 40 on the aisle and stuff like that. And I'm like, and it makes me feel really sad that, culturally, just to fit in, not to, just all this noise and stuff as we grow up, go through school, parenting, be a good kid. We're almost told to switch this stuff off. We're not told to switch your intuition off, but for me, kids have this in abundance. They feel certain things, they can see certain things, and we kind of designed their life to grow up and not pay attention to that. So I'm quite conscious to allow the kids to feel that, because I think if we do, we would make so many better decisions in our life, in business, everything. And I think you can get back there, but because it's something that you've really cut off from, or you've distanced yourself from, the longer it goes, the harder it is to get back there, and it takes work. Again, I'm 47, so I can't remember if I was that intuitive as a kid, but let's say by the age of 10, all that's switched off. You've got 37 years of layers on top of that, being told what to do, not to. And so I think that's really sad. And I think if we allow people so I'm a big believer in allowing people to do the jobs and get out their way, just clear the way for them to do their jobs, because they know what's important and stuff like that. But that ties into that intuition. They know what's important. People know it, and we just steamroll over everyone's intuition. And I think if we took some distance rather than projecting all over them, things would be better in their lives and in business. Does that?
Oh, I agree. I agree with you 100%. I think that, and this is, I'm not an expert. This is my opinion. So take it or leave it. If it's resonant, cool. I'm not committed to being right or wrong about it, but here's my perspective. There's some research that studied like genius children over the course of like 35 or 40 years. And again, I can't cite I don't even remember what it was called, but essentially what it showed was that over the course of a child's life, if they are, prone to being gifted or genius, in whatever term you want to use, something like only like 7% of kids that were measured as something like that, around like the genius as a child, by the time they were like 35, were still at, genius level. So it was like they like X amount of percentage of kids were no longer gifted at 12 years. Say they started measuring them at like 5. X amount of kids were no longer gifted at 12. Then an even greater percentage were no longer gifted at 16, and so on and so forth, until into their adulthood, only such a small percentage of those original children that were cited as gifted or tested as gifted actually were able to sustain their giftedness. And I think that there's something probably very similar around our intuition. And it's exactly like you said, because we live in these environments, we grow up in this world or these societies that is not necessarily, most of them, especially Western culture, not necessarily prone to celebrating intuition or spirituality or, some of those more intangible things. As you were talking, I was thinking about, imagine a child that grew up in Boston, right? And their parents are professors, at whatever prestigious university. Like I think of that region of the world as they hold academic achievements in a very high regard, right? You think about a child that's born and raised in Bali, right? They're not raised with that same societal or cultural influence that, academia at all costs. They're being supported to make sure they go to the temple on the high holy days, and that they, do their meditation daily. Like, right, the environments within which we grow up have an influence on the relationship that we have with education, the relationship that we have with our spirituality. And I think that is a really great place to start if you want to cultivate your intuition. I would say what we're inevitably cultivating is your level of self-awareness first. And part of cultivating our self-awareness is the ability for us to look at ourselves as an emotional being, and understanding that every single person across the planet has emotional experience. We are all sentient beings, and not only are all of us humans, so are all the plants, and so are all the animals. Whether you like it or not, we all feel. We are all connected. There is some source energy running through all of us, and when that is the thing that we are seeking to get to tap into more, right? That is what I believe, like what intuition is and where it lives. But we can't access this without a level of self-awareness. So I think the start is recognizing, in what ways did I grow up that impacted my emotional experience, right? In what way was I conditioned to not feel? Or in what way was I conditioned to feel, right? A child in Boston may be really supported to cultivate this wisdom center, right? To live very much like from the neck up in terms of this academia. A child in Bali, again, I'm making generalizations here, but roll with me.
Yeah.
You know, the child in Bali, like they're probably a little bit more accustomed to tapping into those wisdom centers down below. So no matter where you come from or where you're starting, I think can you begin with a recognition of, or starting place of, you know, in what way did I grow up shape the way that I feel, the way that I think, or that I don't feel, or that I don't think, right? And then we need to, you know, I think cultivating intuition and self-awareness, one of the biggest things we can do is slow down. And we live in a world, Colin, as you're very aware, that is not conducive to slowing down.
Yeah.
So you really want to tap into that internal wisdom, that internal power. I really believe like it is a superpower to be able to create space in your life these days. Space and time to think, space and time to be, space and time to laugh. And when we cultivate that space, when we cultivate that self-awareness, now we've got a better compass or barometer to assess. Does this thing light me up? Does this thing, situation, person, blah, 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 does it bring me joy and fulfillment? Am I experiencing like elation? Do I feel expansive? Do I feel like light? Am I taking deep breaths? Am I, you know, in my body? Or is this situation, person, boss, manager, scenario, location, whatever, constricting me? Do I feel tight in my body when I'm in these environments? Right? So this is the place to start if you want to cultivate your intuition. It's just paying attention to that stuff. There's nothing you need to do. There's nothing you need to do. It's actually quite the opposite. We need to just do a lot less. We need to be good at just being. We need to be good at just paying attention and being ruthlessly honest with ourselves. Gosh, I mean, this came up already in our conversation, but I think unfortunately we live in a world that's really easy to gaslight ourselves. Hence, some of us, like, we don't even know who we are at our core. We're living like from the outside in, doing what our parents thought we should do, ticking, like, it's what I call box ticking culture.
Yeah.
Go to school, get a job, buy a house, get married, have a kid, get a dog, blah, blah, blah. I mean, the quintessential kind of box ticking. But did you ever stop to ask yourself, is this what I want? Is this my path? Is this the thing that lights me the F up? Like, is this right? And I think if you've never done that and you're in a life or a scenario where you're like, how did I get here? I think just like lots of grace and be willing to slow down a little. And can you tap into some of those other wisdom centers and start getting real with yourself around like, what's the actual current state of the union over here?
Yeah. It's really strange because as you were talking, I was thinking the way that you were explaining, and I was thinking, oh yeah, like how does an employee think about this? And you know, they go to work and actually and then I was like, oh, hang on, how does the CEO feel about this? Because you go, oh, like the CEO has the power and influence. If this guy gets it, if he creates, he slows things down, what a great way to then run the company. You create space. And because I was thinking, you know, I don't know why we always think, oh yes, the CEO and they've got this power and status and stuff like that. They must have it all worked out. No, I don't think that's true. I think that everyone's as messed up as everyone else in so many ways. Probably even more. They probably have a ton of stuff you just don't know going on. But I was thinking, how powerful would that be if the guy or lady at the top, sorry.
Good catch. Yeah, I wasn't going to call you. You did it a couple times. I wasn't going to call you
I should
do it every time. But look at you growing and learning over
You just have to keep beating me until I get it right. So I should lead with ladies because I think that's a much better way to go. But if they get it, if they create that space. And so again, I've used this same example in many conversations. So when I had kids, I thought it would be, I tell them what to do and they do it. And they didn't do it. And I got really angry about it. And what I realized was it was actually about mirroring my behavior. And then, so the prime example was at dinner. They would pick up some food with their hands. And I'm like, no, we use a knife and fork. You know, they were old enough at the time to do it. And then I realized as I was putting the food on the plate, I just grabbed one myself and ate it. And I was like, oh shit, that's me. That's what they're doing. And at that point, I was like, oh, okay, this is about what I'm doing. They're mirroring my behavior. And I was like, oh, okay. Whenever I look at the kids, I really have to, even if I think I'm going to have a go at them, sometimes it happens. I turn it back and go, what actions was I demonstrating that led them to do that? It might not be in that moment, but actually, am I showing up that way for them? So, and then if you apply that same logic to the owner of a business, CEO, whoever, that is going to ripple down, you know, and people are going to start mirroring that behavior. You know, people are fed up of being told what to do. You know, if they see the CEO, you know, doing these things, and you know, it's not about telling; it's about actually seeing it and being public with it. I would say having the courage to be public, because again, I think a lot of this stuff is quite traditional. You know, people put, you know, these high level people on pedestals and say they've got to be a certain way. And I think that I don't know why I say this, it's just my opinion. They're actually desperately unhappy. It's quite lonely at the top, I feel. I don't think they have a lot of people to talk to openly and honestly, especially in the work environment. And then I think if they were more public about, okay, look, this is what I'm doing, this is how I'm trying to do it, you don't have to do it. But I think a lot more people would feel open. It's sort of that reflective kind of energy and going, oh, okay. And it feels like rather like you said, it's not being reactive to, you know, the outside. It's coming from inwards and it goes out, and then people can see that and go, oh, okay, look, we're okay to be us. And it's almost like you're letting go of that, you know, your fists and go, oh, I can be this thing. And I think if you had more of that in companies and that sort of spread through the culture of a company, and I have to say, it starts at the top. I've talked about this a few times. I think you can experiment with small teams here, but starting here and trying to grow across the company, it's very difficult. I think it really has to start at the top. So again, correct me, you know, you're much more experienced than I am in any of this, but you know, I think it really has the biggest impact if it starts at the top and is consistently done. And it's not a message, it's a practice, a thing that consistently shows up. And then people feel that, they see that in communication, in how you are and interact, and that feeds the culture and that changes things.
Yeah. It's that quintessential do as I say, not as I do, right?
Yeah.
And you're right. I think it's human behavior, right? Whether it's our children or our direct reports, like they're going to model what we do. There's a coach that I used to work with. His name's Adam Quiney. We actually recently we had him on our podcast, Soroka Speaks, and that'll come out in a little bit. But he talks a little bit about like the heartbreak of leadership. And sometimes, like, you know, if you want to be a great leader, like be prepared to get your heart broken, because most people, most humans will not learn from other people's mistakes. And when we usually have to, most people and most leaders will have to like kind of walk the road themselves to sort of implement the learning or the mistakes, or the learning from the mistakes that they've made. So there's something about that. I think when we're talking about like leading at the top, I do think there is this, I mean, at its core, the distinction is growth mindset, really. I mean, we need to be able to, as you know, leaders and parents, model what a growth mindset looks like, which means that we're celebrating effort predominantly, not necessarily results. Of course, I'm all for celebrating wins. We need to do that too. But we can't be performing or putting in effort only to win, because we're not going to all the time. Nothing grows all year round, right? We are cyclical beings. Business is cyclical. And we need to interact, I think, with the cyclical nature of things in a different way. I totally get, say you're a public company and you've got stakeholder obligations, and like, you know, your mandate from your board and your stakeholders is, you know, grow every quarter all the time. And I think that that's you know, something to aspire for. I'm just not sure. I think in the moments where nature or the universe in its cyclical nature of things will tend to exert its power. We need to have grace and navigate those times in a different way than just it's bad or wrong or we've underperformed or whatnot. So by celebrating effort, getting back to the growth mindset, again, cultivating these environments where there's like this desire or this autonomy where everybody wants to do the best job they can, right? They are engaged, they're inspired, they feel part of something. They want to see that thing come to fruition. And when we can cultivate environments where we're showing up from that place, then it's much easier to like celebrate the effort. Like maybe we missed the mark this time, but we did our damnedest and we all know we did. And that's to be celebrated.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Does that kind of track a little bit?
Yeah, definitely. And I love that idea that, you know, not everything grows, you know, through the seasons. And I was thinking about sales team. They've always got these quotas and targets. When they hit them, they've got to smash the next one. It's like, okay, like it's like this aggressive. You know, maybe I'm against sales. That's probably some of my bias sitting in there. But it's just this thing. You go, it can't all be going up and up and up. It's you know. I think about farming and stuff like that. There's a reflective moment of, you know, what you're going to plant next year and how that's going to go. And, you know, you can't harvest while you're planning your growth. I'm not a farmer, obviously, clearly by my
I think there's something to be learned about agriculture and business, though. I think you're right on the money there.
Oh, good. Yeah. So there's something I wanted to actually ask you, you know, through your experience and who you work with, how do people approach you? Do people come to you when they recognize that there's trouble in their company? Or because in my mind, and again, please correct me if I'm wrong, I think about my dad and like how he worked, and you know, that generation really was, you know, go to work every day, 100%, like not 100%, but he always worked, never took any time off sick. And if I show him how I work now, and I'm more about, okay, it's about working with my energy when I feel best, finding my zone of genius and trying to use that. It's a very different mindset, and I don't think he would understand it. So I've not had the conversation. So, but then I think about people in positions like CEOs. I don't think necessarily of younger people. Yeah, there might be these, you know, younger startups, you know, coming now, and you know, they've got sort of the spotlight on them, etc. And you see them, but generally, most CEOs are of a certain age.
What are you trying to say over here?
What are they? Yeah, I know. What are they coming to you for? Do they already know they're in trouble? Because changing everything, you need to have an open mindset. So how do they come to you? Are they already primed to change?
Great question. Every client is different. Client is different. Sometimes, you know, I might meet someone who has never done any of this kind of work in their organization, right? And maybe they've never even thought of it, but in light of a conversation, they understand or start to recognize what might be possible if they were going to do something like this. So I like to say that, you know, we don't necessarily go in. Sometimes people are like, oh, or like we'll go work with a team or something. And be like, the perception is like, oh, there's something wrong. You're here to fix something, right? And okay, sure, maybe there is some optimization available, but the perspective is much more from a place of like, what's possible? Like, even if we're already winning, even if we've already got the dominant market share, like even if we're like leading the industry, whatever it is, the question for me with an organization or a team is always, what's possible from this place? So maybe there's some disorganization, maybe there's some lack of collaboration, maybe there's some poor communication styles. Great. What's possible from this place? So much is possible from that place, right? Maybe you're smashing it and, you know, your team's killing it and you're turning profit quarter after quarter. Great. What's possible from this place? So there's something about being in touch with possibility. I think that is, you know, why people come and work with us. What we do is highly customized. Everything we do is catered, is bespoke for the business. So you could go to, you know, Deloitte, McKinsey, buy an incredible, like off-the-shelf managerial competency training, or, you know, a subscription to a mastermind for your team, or, you know, online course, the Kajabi membership or something. These are all ways that we can invest in our team. But I believe if you want to create sustainable transformation, right? We need to be working with what is going on for you, the individual, specifically, what is going on as you part of an organization or a team. So ideally, in a scenario where we're working with somebody, a decision maker, a stakeholder that is in touch with possibility, right? We're now in a relationship or an intake process where we are designing what is the possibilities that we want to create, right? If we say, the best way to predict the future is to create it. What's the future that we're creating? What is the future that we're living into? And what might be in the way of that? That really is the essence of coaching, right? It's like, what's in the way of, where you want to go or who you want to become. And then we design bespoke and customized programs for those organizations and individuals that address those specific competencies or distinctions that are going to bridge the gap from what's possible to where they are today. So everything is customized based on the demographic, the psychographic, the location, time zone, cultural background. We've got over 55 coaches and facilitators that we can customize our programs and design our curriculum for and around. So that's kind of the essence, as I believe, like sort of the customized approach is what's needed after somebody is in touch with a different possibility than what the current circumstances might be yielding. That was kind of a fancy way of saying, everybody's different. They come to us for all different reasons.
So it's really strange because when you started talking and you were saying, for some reason I have this connection between someone brings in a coach when there's like a crisis or a problem. But then I was thinking back to the original analogy of, elite athletes. You're at an amazing level. You just want to push to the next level. And I was like, oh yeah, okay. It makes so much sense when you bring it back to athletics and sports teams. It's like, okay, right. Yeah. You don't wait until it's, massive injuries and stuff like that. So yeah, it's, and this whole, so I'm going to put this out there. I'm not a big fan of the big consultancy companies because I feel that they sell frameworks and as much as people are unique, I know we have characteristics, etc., that sort of kind of put us in boxes. I'm not necessarily a big fan of boxes, but I think these frameworks are, off the shelf and, go and put everyone through this training program. I don't think that works because in the same way companies are different, how they think, the team, the products, everything is really unique. Two bed companies, they're not the same. Their ethics and the way that they run things is going to be completely different. And one training might work, and it's about tailoring that. And I think I've in my experience, I've been in again banking, and there seems to be this reputational thing where they go, oh yeah, we're going to get an external consultancy. Yeah, we're going to pay absolutely astronomical amount of money for this name brand to come in. And to be honest, the people that they brought in, like, it just felt like a pyramid scheme. It was just like, okay, you've got like some people that like you've just literally like thrown in, have no idea what they're doing. And then you've got a couple of managers come in and then a higher manager come in. And it's not about the company. And I'd like people to get away from that and really connect with people that do understand the change, do take the time to understand you. And yes, that might take you a little bit longer, but the results are basically lifelong. It's not for the next 6 months or year to hit your quotas. It's about weaving that into the fabric of your company and the people in it. And that takes longer, and it's not just not a named brand, so I'm going to put it out there. I'm sure there'll be people that are not happy with that, but
I think it just, to each their own, right? It depends on what you're after. I might actually push back and say, I don't know that those larger consultancies are selling frameworks. I think they're selling formulas, not frameworks. And I think that's the problem, is the formula doesn't work for everybody. People actually need better, maybe more, like, for lack of a better term, more loose frameworks within which they can be agile and adjust and adapt, as opposed to do this, then that. If you do this, then you will get that, right? The if this, then that kind of thinking. That's where I like, so, semantics, framework, formulas, what have you. But I think that's actually like, I think that those organizations are actually selling probably formulas, and that's why they don't necessarily work, and they might work sometimes, but the essence to what you're talking about is what I call sustainable transformation. So it's a sustainable transformation, and that can only occur over a period of time. So of course, in our customization, we can customize everything from, budget to curriculum to all the things within reason, of course. But I think that it's within that customization. So the way that we like to work with organizations is we do cohort-based group learning, and we supplement that learning with one-on-one coaching. So in the group training, we're giving what I call, like, we're doing business in English, but we're, while these words are English, I like to think of it like we're giving a team, or like a leadership team, or, whatever, an entire org, a department, whoever we're working with, we're giving that group of people a specific set of language, right? We're teaching them a new language. We're teaching them a set of and series of distinctions which allow them to distinguish their behavior. And in that distinguished state, can better choose the way in which they need to show up or collaborate or work with each other aligned with a specific goal. So that's the idea of the group training, right? Get everybody on the same page, give them all the same distinctions, use the right examples, get in a dialogue as a group. Let's work with these tools, these distinctions, this new language, this new way of communicating, this new way of being with each other that generates a different result than what we've currently been producing. Then we supplement that with one-on-one coaching, right? So now you and I are in a private container, and you can be like, I love that distinction that we went over in the last group session, and, I'm trying to put it into practice, but man, Sally Sue over here is just really giving me a run for my money. And how can I work with her in this way that's right? So then we're creating a bespoke experience for the individual where they can address what's specifically coming up for them in their life and in their work, and enhance like the implementation of those tools, I suppose, in action. Right. So and this is what I love about working with teams, is the ability because what we're doing not only enhances their performance in business, right? Transformational leadership is about transforming the individual. Right. Yeah. So this is about, and this is where you mentioned something earlier, like, it's true. Sure. You want to take a group of middle managers, and that might not move the needle in terms of culture or change to the degree that we want across the whole org. But I promise you, with the right organization, with the right facilitator, whether it's Soroka or not, with the right transformational leader, with the right transformational coaching, you will transform each and every one of those individual managers' lives. Yeah. You change the way they show up to their family. You're changing the way that they interact in communication with their wife. You're repairing potentially relationships or grudges that they've had with their parents out of the distinctions that you're teaching that are going to be great for business. But guess what? They're just great in life, and they're great in our interpersonal dynamics. So this is I like to think of myself sometimes as a bit of a covert operative. This is why I love doing work in business, because it's I get to go into business. They've got the budgets, they've got the commitment, they've got the thing, but I get to go in and work with people. I think I might have said with you in our non-live conversation, people will ask what kind of organizations do you work with? The ones with people in them.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So, yeah.
I think this is something that we have this thing where we say work and life, or home life, are two separate things, and I disagree. These are combined. Even if you try and leave emotions at the door, they seep in, grudges happen. And if you go, I actually, like your prime example, you change the way that they're thinking or showing up, and then they do that at home, and then their marriage just it just blossoms even more. Wow, that's just brilliant. And if they're happy at home, then they're going to show up at work better, right? This is just an amazing thing to help people with, right?
Somebody asked me once, what was one of the most powerful coaching experiences, or I can't remember what the question was, but my answer was, there's a gentleman that I worked with, fairly kind of, mainstream blue collar dude, really beautiful man, wholehearted, loving, kind, not an a-hole, not going behind his wife's back, just genuinely good dude. And I remember he came to a session and he told me, in light of whatever our previous session or something, I'm gonna get my breath taken away. He goes, I told my 12-year-old son that I loved him for the first time last night. And I just was so moved and inspired at the thought of this work potentially changing the course of that 12-year-old boy's life.
Yeah.
You know, and that's
Yeah.
something that, you know, we weren't that wasn't necessarily the reason he came to coaching, right?
Yeah.
Or what we were working on or what we were talking about.
Yeah.
And that wasn't necessarily some great valuation or some big exit or whatever. That was like something so meaningful, right? That will truly change the course of probably both of their lives.
Yeah. For me, that's the ripple effect, right? And you know, you've changed his life, but you've changed his son's life. Yeah, and he will change maybe his kids' lives. That's what all of this is about. It's about humans, right? And we are all human, and that's beautiful. So I had a few more questions, but I think that's probably the best.
I was going to say, I've got a couple team members. I got a couple team members waiting for me in an internal meeting right now, Colin. But no, we're good to go. This was so lovely. Thank you so much for having me. I really, really appreciate it.
And you helped me change my mind on certain aspects, and I love that when I have conversations and you can challenge me. So in many ways, so I take that forward into future conversations. So thank you so much. Real pleasure for me, and I really appreciate you.
Pleasure for me too, Colin. I'm so glad you reached out, and maybe we can do this again sometime.
Yeah, perfect. That'd be great.
Thanks for having me.
Take care.
Ciao for now.
Thanks very much, Emily. Bye.
Bye.